So one thing we're going to have to learn about here that's going to be really important for us is how to write our answers for domain and range. Because yesterday we talked about the domain and range where we just had to list the numbers, right? Where if we wanted to write domain, we just listed the x values, and if we wanted to write the range, we just listed the y values, which is going to be the case if you just have single points. But a lot of the functions that we're going to look at are not just single points, they're entire equations where we have lines and stuff like that. So we have to know how to write the answers. So the first thing I have here is just a quick review of less than and greater than signs. So I find sometimes that this is something that kids still have backwards, right? Because you learned probably in elementary school about the alligator eating the bigger number, or maybe the Pac-Man or something. You always ate the bigger number. So that still applies. That's true. But we want to read it from left to right. So if we see a sign that looks like these first two, that's less than, right? And so one way to keep those straight, if you're still like a little backwards on that, if you're like my nephew, he's going into 3rd grade, and we'd ride the bike through the campground on vacation in the summer, and I'd be like, which way are you turning? And he'd say left, and he'd turn right. So we tried to work on left and right a little bit. So if you also are having a little trouble with your left and right, and your less than and greater than, of course, this may not help you. If you do like this and turn them just a little bit, this one is kind of like an L for your left hand. It should be your left hand, right? So this will help you with your left and right too if you're struggling with that there. This side makes an L. That's your left hand. If you turn it just a little bit, it looks like this symbol right here, which is your less than. So left hand, less than. That might help you keep it straight. If it has a line underneath it, that means it can be less than or equal to that number. Without the line, it has to be less than that number. And then, of course, greater than is the opposite of that. So make sure you got those straight. We also are going to learn about interval notation, and I'm not sure if you've seen interval notation or not before. So in interval notation, you always list the values left to right. To include the endpoint, you are going to use brackets. And brackets are going to look like this. So like the square brackets. If the endpoint is not included, you're going to use parentheses. And parentheses, of course, look like that. I think you're more familiar with that sign. Okay? And it's sometimes with interval notation, we're going to go to infinity. And if you have an infinity, you always need to use a parentheses with the infinity sign. So if you have infinity as one of your endpoints, if you use a bracket, that means it's included. Can you ever include infinity? Is it like a real number? Can you ever get to infinity? You cannot. So you don't want to use a bracket with it because you can't actually get to it. So you want to use a parentheses instead. So let's look at what I'm talking about here about using this interval notation. Oh, wait, I got a couple more things here. Then we'll talk about what I'm talking about. Sometimes our domain might include like this section over here and another section over here. So there are two symbols that get used quite often. One of them much more than the other here. And we use these because mathematicians do not like to use words. We like to use symbols to reduce the number of words that we have to use. That's why I can't wait till later in the year when calculus really gets cranked up. And I like to leave their problems on the board to scare you whenever you come in because it's just like a board full of crazy stuff, right? So we like to use symbols instead of words. So this symbol right here, which is pretty much just a U, that is our union symbol, and it's like saying or. So it means we can use these numbers over here or these numbers over here. They both could be used. The upside down U here is for your intersection. And it means and. So it means you have to fit both criteria for something. So like if I'm talking about a number that is less than 4, but also greater than 0, then I'm talking about the numbers between 0 and 4, right? So it has to be both, not just one or the other. So we today are going to use this union symbol the most. The and symbol is not going to show up as much today. We'll see it a little bit later. So the union is what we're going to use. All right, that's symbols there. All right, so let's look at, I'm going to start with number line examples before we start going to like our full-blown coordinate plane. So if we look at the number line symbols here that we're using here, if you see an open circle like this, that means that that point is not included. So that means on this number line that -5 is not included because it's just an open circle. It's not colored in. If you see a closed-in circle that's colored in like this, that means that number is included. There. Okay. So in interval notation, what we want to do is we want to start on the left-hand side. And we want to start with the lowest number that is included in our answer set. And we want to go up to whatever the highest number is. Okay, so I like interval notation a lot better than I like inequality notation. I think it's a little bit easier. We do have to know both because on our exam they may put either one. It's hard to tell which one. You'll see some of both on the exam. But I like interval notation the best. As far as you giving me answers, you can use either one. But just know some of the problems, like if I give them to you multiple choice, which I will, several of them, they might have the answers in interval notation, they might have them in inequality notation. So interval notation, the lowest number I've got for my answer set here is -5. Do I need to use a parentheses or a bracket with that? Which one was the not included? It's the parentheses. I'm going to add that over here. Parentheses is for not included. So we'll use the parentheses there with the -5. And then we're going to put a comma. And then we want to go all the way up to +1. And should I use a parentheses or a bracket for that one? It's going to be a bracket, right? Because it is included. So whenever we include it, we use a bracket. Okay? Now, if I want to do inequality notation, it's fairly similar for this type of problem. I've got, I still am going to start with my lowest number, -5. You always want to use less than signs whenever you're doing numbers in between. So you always want to use less than. Because this is not included, I'm going to use less than. We'll put the X in the middle. And then because the 1 is included, I'm going to use less than or equal to +1. And so if I'm trying to write my answer and I'm saying these numbers in this range are my answer, then I could use interval notation and this would be my answer, or I could use this. Okay, any questions on that? Have you guys seen these parentheses and brackets before? This is new. You've seen them, Trinity. You did not have Mr. Brown, though, because you were at East, right? So, anybody else see these with Mr. Brown? A few of you, maybe it's mentioned. Some of you know. So, all right. So, he may have done some different things with different classes, possibly there. So, it hopefully won't be too hard to catch on to. All right. So let's look at number 2. Number 2 is given to us in words. So one of the things they really like to focus on in math is different notations, right? Like, given that we have to go from words to equations to graphs to tables because they're all the same, right? We got to know how to translate between the two. So this one's words, which I know some of you are saying that should not be in math, but they are. So the set of numbers less than 3 or greater than 7. So let's think about this. We've got, I'm actually going to do inequality notation. We're looking, actually no, let's do a number line. I got 3. I got 7 here, okay? So the numbers that are less than 3. So I got less than 3 if it just says less than, I don't include that point because it's not less than or equal to. And I want the numbers less than 3, which means I'm going to go down here to the left, numbers lower than 3, right? Or they could be numbers that are greater than 7. So greater than 7 is from 7 and up, right? So this is what I like to call an OR problem. We're not doing the things in between two numbers. We're doing the stuff on the that outside, right? So if I'm going to do this in interval notation or in inequality notation, I'm going to have two different expressions for this because there's two different things going on here, right? They're separated. Up here, it was one answer set, just in between these numbers right here. But down here, it's two different things. That means I'm going to need to use, when I say that OR right there, I'm going to need to use that union symbol to tell me that I'm going to have two separate things. So if I do interval notation, if I go all the way out to the end of the number line, to the very end, to as far as I can go, what's going to be on this left-hand side of that number line? It goes past 0. You got -1, -2, -3, -4, -5, -6, -7. It's going to negative infinity. Negative infinity is on this side. Positive infinity is over here on the right-hand side, right? So if the number line keeps going on forever and ever and ever, you got negative on the left, positive on the right. So, so if I want to list the very lowest number, it's going to be negative infinity. And it's going to go up to 3. Now let's think about whether we need parentheses or brackets. If you have an infinity, you always have to use a parentheses because it's not included because you can't ever make it to infinity, right? And then over here with the 3, Kaylee, what do you think? Should I use a parentheses or a bracket for that one? Parentheses, because it's not included, so I'm going to use a parentheses there. So then I've got a gap. So at that gap, I'm going to put my union symbol saying nothing here, right? It's this or this, not the stuff in between. And I'm going to start back up at 7 and go all the way up to positive infinity. Okay? And Jasper, for 7, should I use a bracket or should I use a parentheses? Okay? Brackets are for ones that are included, which are closed dots. Do we have a closed dot here? It's parentheses for that. How about for the infinity, Jasper? Can you count to infinity for me? No, you would die first, right? Because you'd never get there, right? So, so it's also going to be parentheses. Infinity is always parentheses every time, okay? All right, does that make sense for you guys? Okay, now if we do this with inequality notation, the words really help us a lot. It's the numbers less than 3, so we're going to say x is less than 3, or greater than 7, so we're going to say x is greater than 7. Okay, questions here? Alrighty, let's keep going. Try the next two on your own. Okay, try those next two on your own. And while you're trying these next two, we're going to need some vertical line test stuff coming up. So while you're trying these next two, I'm going to give everybody your vertical line. Vertical line is getting integrated. Makes such a good vertical line. Rollers are too thick. I can buy a whole box of vertical lines for 98 cents at Walmart. So that would last you for years, probably. seeing lots of answers for number 3. I'm not seeing much for number 4. A lot of you are trying to draw a number line, which I think is a good idea. Check with your neighbor and see if between the two of you, you guys can figure it out. There, talk about number 4 a little bit. See if you can come up with something.
Give me like a second. So I'm gonna put X like this, and then less than negative 7. And I'm gonna do X to the X. I got one feet wrong.
But your part for your negative 5
Yeah.
It is okay. All right, let's go over these and see what we've got here. So, for the first one, we've got, you should have negative infinity up to negative 7. You should have a bracket with that negative 7. You'll put your union symbol, and then you should have parentheses for comma infinity. I think I heard somebody talking, telling me they had infinity 4 or something like that, and I immediately know that is wrong. Okay? It wouldn't matter what the question was, it wouldn't matter what you were doing, I would immediately know that was wrong. How can you tell just by looking at that, even if it was a different question, that would be wrong? What always has to go on the left side of your interval? Not necessarily negative, but sort of. The smaller number, right? So if you ever see this, which one's bigger, infinity or 4? Definitely infinity. It's bigger than everything, right? So infinity has to go on the right-hand side. So if you see something like this, if somebody writes 1, negative 3, let's put a bracket there, that's wrong, because the lowest number always has to go first. So make sure that you're going from left to right. You got to put the lowest and then the highest. Lowest and the highest, okay? This one is going to look like this for inequality notation. X is less than or equal to negative 7. Because all of the numbers below negative 7 are included. And we put the or equal to because we have the closed-in dot right there. And then for the second part, we've got X is greater than 4. We do not put an or equal to sign on that one because it's the open circle. Okay, I liked what a lot of you were doing, where you put these numbers on a number line, negative 2, 5, and 7. So it says all numbers between negative 2 and 5, including negative 2 and 5. So if negative 2 and 5 are included, that means they've got closed circles on them. And we're looking at all the numbers in between them, like this. And then it just says, and 7. So what that means is you just got like 7's the one other thing right here that'll work. Just one dot. It's not greater than 7. It's not less than 7. It's just 7, right? So that was sort of a trick I'm throwing in here at you. See what you can do. For the negative 2 to 5, we're going to put our lowest number first. So we got negative 2, comma 5 for that. And Alex, should I use the parentheses or the brackets for that? Brackets, because those are included. So we got a bracket on both sides. So that takes care of this first part right here. And it is, with interval notation, what you'll probably just see here is a comma 7 for that. I don't think you'll see interval notation when you just got a single number like that very often, though. I think they'll use inequality instead. But that's how we'll do it. For inequality notation, when you have in-between stuff, right, between two numbers, what you want to do is put your lowest number first. You're going to use less than signs every time. You're going to have lowest number, less than x, less than highest number. So less than x, less than 5. Should I make these less than or equal to? Yes, because they're included. So we want to make them less than or equal to. So that takes care of the -2 to 5 part. And then we'll just put union x equals 7 for that at the end. Okay, so learning how to do the notation is really the biggest part of this, but now let's look at some like actual functions and some domain and range. So I gave you all a vertical line, okay? So you're going to take your vertical line. I'm going to get my yardstick. I'll show you up here. All right, so if I'm looking at domain, right? If I want to know my domain, first of all, the first one is just random points, right? Just random points. So when I look at domain, I'm looking at my x values, right? And this is just random points. So what I'm going to do, and I'm going to call them out, then I'll have to come back and write them down because I can't do both at the same time. So what I'll have to do here is I will go across, and right here, there's a point, right? Where does that hit my x-axis at? What's the x there? -3, I think. And then so -3, we will write that one down. I don't have it. Then I'm going to go over -2. There's another one. No points here. -1. I'm sorry, not -1. That's +1 right there. Now those 2 points, there's 2 points there, but they have the same x. I'm only going to list it one time. And then we'll keep on going, and I've got a 4, right? So for our domain, we're going to have, and if it's just numbers listed, just use some squiggly brackets. And we had a -3, a -2, a 1, and a 4. Okay? And here it comes to where I'm not tall enough to do this again. We want to do the same thing with our spaghetti, but we want to use it horizontally, right? So if I go across, where's that first place that I hit my y-axis? -4, right? And I'm not tall enough to do the whole thing this way. So I've got -4. And then if I keep going up right here, I got -2. Right here, I've got 0. Right here, I've got 3. Right here, I've got 5. Oh, squiggly brackets. Another way you could do this is just write down the coordinates of the point and do like we did yesterday. Just list your x's, list your y's. That'll work too. Is this going to be a function? No, it is not. It is not a function because of this right here. You've got 2 points on the same vertical line. That makes it not a function, right? So it's not a function. Okay, now the next one, we've got solid lines, right? So when we have solid lines, we can't just list points because all the numbers in between are included. So when we're doing domain, we want to turn our line vertical, okay? So we want to use our spaghetti, and what we're going to do is we're going to go across and see what we've got, okay? So for our spaghetti, we are going to look. Do I hit the graph at all over here? Nothing, right? So this is not included. Right over here, I start to hit the graph. And so that is at right there. You're going to look at your x-axis. That's -3. And unless there is an open circle, if it is a solid line or if it has a solid dot, unless there's an open circle, use a bracket because it's included. Okay? And then if I go over, I'm still hitting the graph, still touching something. Right here is where it ends, right? So here at is where it ends. So that's going to be positive 3. I'm going to use a bracket for it as well, because if it wants it to not be included, it'll have an open circle there. All right, and so that is going to be my domain, because over here I got nothing, right? Everybody okay there? So this means from negative 3 to positive 3, those are my x values that I can have on this, and all the numbers in between. Okay? Range, you're going to do the same thing, but you're going to turn your spaghetti horizontal. And I'm not tall enough to do this well. But you're going to go up with your horizontal line, and as you take that horizontal line up, the first time that horizontal line hits your graph is right there at negative 4, right? So you'll have negative 4, and then you got, all your horizontal lines. You guys just use your spaghetti. All these horizontal lines are still hitting the graph, right? Where does it stop hitting the graph? Positive 3, and we're going to include that one as well, right? So negative 4 to positive 3 is your range. Okay, I could write that in inequality notation, but let's just stick with interval for right now. I think it's a little bit easier. Is this a function? It is not. It does not pass that vertical line test. That is a no. Okay, we okay here? Makes sense. All right, let's get our vertical line again. Domain. We're looking at where this hits the x-axis. Nothing over here. Oh, right here we start to hit it. What number are we at? Negative 4. Do we use a parentheses or a bracket? That's going to be a parentheses because we got that open circle, right? Okay? We're going to keep on going, touching. Now, I got nothing over here, but what did they put on the end of that line? They put an arrow. So even though it's not touching here, is it supposed to be? Yeah, because that keeps on going. So where am I headed to? Infinity. So I'm going to use infinity over here on the end. And I always use a parentheses with infinity. Right? Okay? Alright, so. Alright, so on this, for our range, turn your spaghetti sideways, right? Nothing. Where's the first number I start to hit? Alright, right there at 1. Do I use a parentheses or a bracket? Bracket, because those are closed-in dots. That whole line there is solid. Okay? Alright, so then I've got to keep on going up. Up. Am I still touching up here? I don't look like it, but I am. Some of you are not yes because I got that arrow right there. This keeps on going up. This is going to go up forever, right? So I'm going to have an infinity on that side as well. And I always use a parentheses with an infinity. Okay? Is this one a function? Yes. It passes our vertical line test. Bonus points, is it a one-to-one function? It is not. It does not pass the horizontal line test. Right there. Okay. So, let me see if there is one I really need to make sure I do. Crazy one. I don't think so. I think they're all. You guys kind of get the idea. I've got extras here, but we're running out of time. I'm gonna do I'm gonna do this one right here real quick. Alright. I'm skipping over to this one right here. If I'm looking at that domain, -6 is the first place that I hit. I keep going over until I get to 5. Love you. Alright, and then I have the bracket over here on this side. What about the range? What do you guys think for the range for that? What's the lowest Y we're going to have? Alright, do I need a bracket or a parentheses for that? It's going to be a bracket. It feels a little like it should be a parentheses because of this open circle, but you got a closed circle over here. So if there's any closed circles, you're going to do a bracket. And then you're going to go up to, what's the highest number I've got on the Y? 2. Bracket or parentheses? Bracket. And is that a function? Yes, it is a function. Okay. So you guys kind of get the idea there. There'll be some, like for example, this one's got arrows on both ends, right? So this one, it goes all the way over here. It keeps going all the way over here. Your domain on that one is going to be negative infinity to positive infinity, right? That just means everything, right? And same thing for the range. It goes down forever and up forever. So the range would also be negative infinity to positive infinity, and that one is a function also. So we are going to have an assignment tonight, and hopefully it's just like doing more of these problems that you have here, really. So hopefully it will not take you very long. You may take your vertical line with you if you would like, or you can throw it in the trash on your way out. But please don't go open your mom's unopened box of spaghetti to get yourself one vertical line out. I think she's going to be upset with you if you do that. So, I mean, it's not going to make a difference, but then the box is open in the cabinet, and then she's going to open the cabinet and get it out. It's going to spill everywhere. So, I'm going to say she's preferring not to do that.
Oh, we got homework already.
Already?
Oh,
We can't waste no time. I estimate that this should take you about 10 minutes. If it's taking you a lot longer than 20, then you're doing something wrong probably. Tomorrow I do not have smart breakfast, but I am in the cafeteria on Friday mornings, so you are welcome to come by and ask me a question in the cafeteria while I'm just there to break up fights really. So.